All right, so I divided these into different parts, the different things that I went to. Part one, the first session I went to was called Worth Dying For, a new model for dating and relationships. This was by Reverend Brandon Metcalf. The summary of this session, this presentation that he gave was this is what I have written down. You are worth dying for. Your worth comes from Christ and how he values you. Don't treat yourself or others as less valuable than that. And I supported this by Bible verses and regularly return to Christ as the reason why people should feel valuable. And people should fight to find the right partner who has Christ as the most important. He had this phrase he was talking about. Christ should be, everybody's looking for the one. Well, Christ is the one, and that should be the one in your life. Jesus should be the one in your life. You should be looking for the two. And the two, whoever that ends up being, they should have Jesus as the one in their life. And it was a fantastic presentation. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the session. I enjoyed how it wasn't just kind of dumb, secular, practical advice about dating, but it really got at the heart of our Christian identity of we have to keep in mind who we are in relationship to Christ, and picking your partners based on who they are in relationship to Christ. This goes against the whole unequally yoked thing where you date somebody who is not a Christian or is anti-Christian, who is a different religion altogether, and how that's ultimately a bad idea. So anyways, fantastic presentation. I absolutely loved it. The kids needed to hear this. It was firmly rooted in scripture. It was well presented. I have nothing bad to say about this. It was fantastic. All right. Part two was a Bible study. So one of the things that they do is every day they would have Bible studies, and the groups would go to Bible study. There would be multiple groups that would all get together. So it would be a large room full of people, and they would have a Bible study. They would have a Bible study presented by, I think it was always two people presenting the Bible study, and whatever group you were in, whatever massive group you were in, that you were assigned your two Bible study leaders. So yeah. So this was the first Bible study that I went to in this format. There were a lot of kind of attention getters at the beginning, things to keep the kids involved as everybody got seated. Throughout, they would be teaching a lesson. They would kind of interrupt the lesson to have something to, raise your hand or involve the crowd or stand up, and it was interactive. Let me see what I have there. Yeah, interactive moments and related stories. So it wasn't just reading the Bible and just doing a verse by verse expository on the Bible, but it had a lot of interactive sort of things. Now, I don't generally teach the youth any different than I teach adults in Bible study. When I teach a Bible study, regardless of the age range, it's generally the same. It's usually I have the text and I go through the text and I say, whatever comes to mind, and then I start jumping around to different texts that come into my mind as I do that. There's 1,000 different ways to run a Bible study. This isn't how I run the Bible study, but this may be the most efficient way to run a Bible study in a room full of tons of kids. And keep their attention while also continuing to deliver good content. So stylistically, I do things differently. I don't think it was necessarily bad. It's just not the way that I'm used to doing things. Overall, I think it was positive. I'm glad my youth went to that. All right. Here's where we start getting controversial. So people started recommending sessions for me to go to online. And this was either based on who the person was presenting or the topic they were presenting on or the summary of their, the summary of the topic. Now, this one, this topic was called Religion, Religions, Religious. And this was a pastor, I believe his name is Ken Chitwood. No, not Chitwood. I've got it written down because I kept saying Chitwood. No, it's Chit, Chit, Chitwood. I don't know. I was thinking Chipman, whatever. Ken Chitwood. The guy, right? Okay. Pastor Chitwood. He was talking about moving from, this was a phrase he used, from Christian privilege to religious plurality. And this phrase was in the summary of the session online. And a lot of people caught this session. And they said, what is he talking about, this whole Christian privilege thing? And I think that this phrase may have even intentionally been controversial, though I do think it's accurate what he was actually trying to describe. Now, the negative way to interpret this is say, okay, Christian privilege. You're talking about like this, white privilege, kind of cultural Marxism, um, check your privilege at the door type thing. That was the initial understanding that a lot of people got of this phrase. That was not what he intended by this phrase. And I know this wasn't what he intended by the phrase because I specifically talked to him about it. And he explained during the session what he meant by the phrase. So, Christian privilege, the summary of this is the idea that you live in a Christian nation. Get rid of that. And honestly, do get rid of that. Because what he was talking about is he's saying, people have this idea that they step out of their house, it's the Andy Griffith show, and everybody in the neighborhood goes to church, and your plumber goes to church, and everybody's a Christian, and it's really a fantasy to believe that. That's not reality, and more so, it's culturally acceptable not to be Christian. So what he was saying is kind of a mental movement away from Christian privilege, the belief that, okay, well, I expect my president, my senator, my governor, my whatever to be Christian and to adhere to Christian principles. I expect that if I pull out a book and say, here, look at that, this is what the Bible says about, insert controversial issue here, that they will follow that they'll respond to that. And he's saying that that's not really the case. Instead, you should look at the world as you step outside, and like, the Greek and Roman times, you have polytheism. You have people who believe in all kinds of different things. You may live next to a Hindu or a Buddhist, or probably an atheist, or somebody who calls himself a Christian but hasn't been to church their entire life. But hey, they like they like to dangle a cross from their mirror or something like that. Like, the reality is that you should expect the people around you need evangelization. You should expect that the people around you are not familiar with Christianity. And this was kind of the point: is how do you reach these people? You are in a mission field constantly in the United States. It's not just missionaries go over to Africa and Papua New Guinea. You are in a mission field right now. Do not expect everyone around you to be a Christian. How do you then interact with these people, and how do you reach them in love? So his presentation went on to kind of explain how you share God's love with these other people. Now, again, a fear that a lot of people had regarding this presentation was that it was kind of teaching blurred ecumenism, or universalism, or something along those lines, or syncretism, that we basically all believe the same thing. We're all climbing the same mountain to the same God, or we're all touching an elephant, and one person feels the trunk of the elephant, and they say, oh, the elephant is, it's this thing, and another person feels the tail, and they say it's a rope, and another person feels a leg, and they say it's a tree, and they're all right because they're all describing the same elephant. That's nonsense, and that's not what he was teaching here either. And what he was teaching is, okay, there are different religions, and Christianity is we know as Christians that our religion is right, exclusively so, and worth sharing. And how do you go about reaching somebody else? So you invite them over to your church. You could even you should actually go out of your way to learn about these other religions and these other customs as well, even if they're not correct. You should still learn about, what does Islam teach? What does Mormonism teach? What do these things teach? And he gave some examples of things that you could do. Is you could organize some sort of exchange. So it's not that you would be going to the local mosque and you would be worshiping with the Muslims. What you would organize is, hey, I would like to come and be an observer here, and I would like to kind of learn and see what's going on here. And I would like to invite you to come and do the same. Not invite you to come and worship, because we have different religions, and we should respect that there are different religions, and those, there are implications beyond that. But different religions are different. We shouldn't treat everything as all the same thing. So I would like to learn more about what you believe. You come learn more about what I believe. And then you develop an ongoing friendship, an ongoing relationship with these people, and you genuinely invest in their lives and care about them. And that this is the way to do evangelism. This is the way to share God's love, is progressively over time interacting with people, and getting to know them, and being interested in what they do and what they believe, even if it's not right, even if Christianity is the only way. In any case, this I understand why it looked like it was going to be controversial going in, and I went and I talked with them, and my experience was that he was not actually teaching anything controversial. Not in the sense, well, he wasn't actually, he was teaching something controversial. He wasn't teaching anything wrong. What he was teaching that was controversial is you need to change your mindset. You're not living in a Christian nation. You are living in a nation where people believe things very differently from you. And how are you going to interact with them to ultimately share God's love as you are commanded to do? So what I'd like to do now is I went and I talked with him afterwards, and I asked him some questions off the record to just kind of clarify that I was getting the right idea. And I asked him some questions on a voice recording, so there's not going to be a fancy video to accompany this. But I mean, this was spur of the moment. I held up my phone and said, "Hey, could you answer these questions?" And he was charitable enough, and he was gracious enough to take the time to answer these questions. And I would like for you to listen to him and kind of hear his own words regarding the questions that I asked, and I might comment on them afterwards. But I'm going to break in the video right now and have a listen to this audio. And here we go. All right, I'm here with Ken Chitwood, and I've got a few questions for him to answer. I just saw his presentation at the National Youth Gathering, and I wanted you guys to get an idea of kind of some of the things that were talked about. So the first question I have is, what do you mean by Christian privilege?
And thank you for that question. It's an important question because I think there's a lot that has been packed into this one word of privilege, and there's a lot of different directions that could go and places that conversation could wander to. But what I'm talking about when I speak of Christian privilege and the shift to religious plurality is that Christianity has long enjoyed a privileged position within U.S. or Western European society. It's been ensconced in culture and in language, in literature, in art, in the understanding of the religious identity of the United States, and that sociological fact is changing. Christianity and its numbers of adherents are diminishing. They're going down. That is just a social fact, and there's a lot of different reasons for it. And what I talk about in my session is to help Christians navigate this shift from being in a position of privilege in society where being Christian is just kind of assumed to now being one religion among many different religious perspectives. And that's what I call the shift from Christian privilege to religious plurality, is the demographic shift from Christians being in the majority to possibly in the future being one minority among many minorities.
Thank you. So my next question is, if Christianity is true, and I think we both agree that it is, if Christianity is true, then why should a Christian go and learn about other religions?
Another great question, because I think one of the biggest difficulties for us is we've often been told that there's two topics you don't talk about at the dinner table: politics and religion. And yeah, religious conversations with people who believe and think and act and do differently than you can be hard and can be tough. But for me, diversity doesn't invite defensiveness. Diversity doesn't invite tribalism. Diversity should invite curiosity. What a wonderful world we live in that we get to learn about it. All the different sciences and studies that exist. And religious studies is one of them. And unfortunately, we're so woefully illiterate when it comes to the religious beliefs and practices of other people. And what I'm inviting people to do is to learn more about other religions, again, because these are our neighbors. These are the people we live with and work with and go to school with, who are in our family. You know, we have the Hindu neighbor and the Muslim coworker and the spiritual but not religious nephew who is oh so fun to talk with at Thanksgiving dinner. And those conversations, those relationships are opportunities for us to grow in knowledge and to grow in relationships with people that we do live with. Like, we're not going to be able to change that. And so we should just lean into those opportunities to learn about other people rather than leaning away. That's not a Christian posture. A Christian posture is one of curiosity, is one of questions, is one of learning. That is the value of Scripture. It's a value of our Lutheran identity, that we would learn, that we would grow. And so we're inviting people into doing that, to learn about other religious traditions.
Thank you. So another question I have is, should Christians participate with other religions in worship and in prayer, or I guess part of the same questions, and should Christians do things like visit holy sites of other religions, go to other temples, things like that?
Yeah, I think this is a difficult question that I think a lot of people wrestle with. Obviously, Lutherans have a very strong conviction about not confusing the worship of one religious body and the worship of another. I mean, we're very clear about this between different kinds of Lutherans. So when it comes to like Lutherans and Muslims, it's not like we're suddenly gonna say like, oh yeah, we can't worship with people from the ELCA, but Muslims, that's totally cool. Like we can definitely participate in prayer at a mosque. I think, even to put aside our Lutheran convictions about this for a moment, not to say they're irrelevant, but to just put them aside and talk about it from an interreligious dialogue perspective. Someone who's like really cares about interreligious dialogue, they're not Lutheran. Let's just say that. I think it's confusing for people to take part in religious practices that are not their own. I think that doesn't make sense. It's not helpful. I think people may go into it with an intention that this shows acceptance, that this shows tolerance, that this helps build peace in the world. And what I think it does is actually show a disrespect for the religious convictions of other people. So again, not even talking about our Lutheran convictions and our Lutheran confessions about this, but just from a purely practical point of view, in terms of interreligious dialogue or interreligious work, I always encourage people to go in and say, you have convictions, you have beliefs, you have practices, and you wouldn't want people who don't know anything about those doing them as if they did, whether that be communion or baptism or whatever it might be. You wouldn't want someone just playing around with that. So why would we do the same with someone else's religious practices or their worship? Now, I've been present at many different acts of worship at other places, like mosques and temples and so on and so forth. I'm an ethnographer of religion. That is my job, to go and to observe. But it's very clear that I'm there to observe. There's very clear lines that I am not practicing with them, because I don't want that from my own perspective and conviction. But then I also want that for the other person's perspective and conviction. I am not there to say I am Muslim or I am Buddhist. I'm there to say I'm trying to understand, to ask questions, to learn. What we were talking about earlier, that we should lean into these relationships so that we might learn more about the world. And I think we need to strike that careful balance. And that takes communication, that takes conversation, that takes a relationship that's more than just that visit at that moment. Of course, you're going to have a more sustained conversation around these things. Otherwise, it gets confusing and it gets weird, and it may hurt more people than it helps.
Thank you. And final question I have: do you have any advice for Christians who want to share the story of Jesus, but don't want to compromise just to get along?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of hinted at this when I answered the last question. It's perfectly good to have convictions, to have particular confessions, and in my relationships with people of other faiths, for example, with Muslims, we disagree on the most fundamental question of religious belief, and that is the nature of God. I am a creedal Christian who confesses the historical creeds as my faith. I do that. I bust out the Apostles' Creed on non-communion Sundays, the Nicene on communion Sundays, and the Athanasian, one time a year, and this is who I am, this is what I believe. And then I hang out with my Muslim friends, dear friends who I love deeply, who I have many theological conversations with, and we disagree about the nature of God. They are not creedal Christians. They're Muslim. They believe in Tawheed, the oneness of God, and they're fully convinced of that. But we are able to disagree well. We're able to have different perspectives and yet have shared conversations. And we get that we believe different things, and we get that we're of different religions. We're Muslim and Christian, but that doesn't stop the relationship, that doesn't stop the conversations, nor should it. We should not allow religious diversity to call defensiveness and tribalism out of us, but instead it should invite curiosity and wonder about what is it that these people believe, why do they believe it, and here's the deal. They'll ask you the same. You have an opportunity to talk about your own faith, because in relationships, it's a dialogue, it's a back and forth. And when I ask questions of other people, they in turn ask questions of me. And I'm able to have a deep spiritual conversation with them, even if we believe fundamentally different things at the start or at the end of that conversation.
That was my interview with Reverend Ken Chitwood. Again, this wasn't something that was scheduled. They didn't have interview slots. just some of these presenters were gracious enough to give me some of their time between sessions. Again, I think he reiterated what he said during the session, basically, that his point was not to get rid of your Christian privilege and treat everybody as equal, or treat every religion, every belief system as equal, but the opposite. Instead, you should recognize the differences in different belief systems and different religions. How can how much better can you evangelize to somebody if you understand what they believe in the first place? Likewise, if you show an interest in somebody's religion, somebody's beliefs, they're more likely to see that you're showing an interest in them as a person, and likewise reciprocate and show an interest in your beliefs, in the Christian belief, in the truth. So this was, I understand why it would be controversial, the phrase, but from what I experienced in that session, it was good. It was fantastic. It was a good point. Yeah. All right. Part 4. This is night 2. So night 1, we had a mass event on night 1, and it was like a fireworks show and concerts and explosions and all the, pretty stuff. I don't think I really documented anything about this. This was the end of night 2. So night 1, like, everybody showed up, and that was the first thing that kind of happened. Everybody showed up, and by nighttime you had all that fanfare, and they opened up the stadium, and they shot fireworks in the sky. It was great. It was a lot of fun. Don't know that there was a whole lot of theological content there. I don't really remember any, but they were cool fireworks, and I like fireworks. The end of night 2, this is the first full day of sessions that people were going to. The end of night 2 was a mass event. And again, I'm looking at my notes that I took here. So this is how it starts out. I said they had some more goofy shenanigans to start off this night while everyone was arriving and taking their seats. And this is something that they would do that I would find out later in the other events, is that's just kind of everybody's taking their seats and they're playing games and they're doing races and they're cracking jokes and they're playing music and stuff like that. And it's just kind of stuff that kind of kept people interested and less bored when they were all taking their seats, because seating tens of thousands of people takes a while. Then they get into the actual worship service, or I don't know what to call it, mass event. We're going to call it a mass event because that's what they called it. The first song was some pop Christian song I didn't recognize. The second song was actually hymn, Crown Him with Many Crowns. So you see how excited I got in this note. Though as the song went forward, it deviated from the text you'd find in the hymnal and kind of turned into something repetitive like crown him, crown him, crown him, crown him, etc. Crown him with many thorns. There's actual text that goes beyond that. But I think the song really quickly deteriorated into, pop, K-pop, what is it? Not K-pop, K-love music, people call it that. Crown him, crown him, crown him doesn't really contribute anything. Like, okay, yeah, crown him. I get it. Like, crown him with many thorns, or crown him with many crowns. There's hymn text, and I would advise you to go and read that, because there's actually some depth to it beyond just crown him, crown him, crown him. I said it would have been interesting to see the band play through the hymn in their set, which is they actually did, to their credit, on during communion of the divine service on the last day. We haven't gotten there yet. I said one of the singers was singing something about, quote, you show up at every tomb of every Lazarus and you call me out. I hate this sort of like allegorizing of biblical stories and saying, who is your Goliath today? Or what lion's den are you in, right now? And like that kind of thing. Like there's an extent to which you can do that in some parts of the Bible, but there is Lazarus. There was, I know there's Lazarus and the rich man and Lazarus, Jesus's friend who he calls out of the tomb, but it's a historical thing. There's this dude who Jesus calls out of a tomb. The story of Lazarus is not the story of Jesus calling your personal Lazarus out of every personal tomb just don't do that, please. I don't remember if this was a music or somebody said this, or I don't have a Lazarus. You don't have a Lazarus. Lazarus is in heaven right now. You don't have a Lazarus. Just stop. Don't do that. I said the message of the song was God can do all things. Yeah. This is not how to handle the text of Scripture to convey that. Instead, it felt like a little too close to the prosperity preacher preaching approach of narcissism, kind of like inserting yourself in every story. You're David, and who is your Goliath? No, stop. If you want to make an allegory out of David is Jesus. You are, if anybody, the weak Israelites who deserve to be smushed by Goliath. Like, please don't do that. Okay, so now they're singing LSB 172, All Creatures of Our God and King, which is pretty solid. And then I said, though the Napoleon Dynamite interpretive dance going on at the time, like, doesn't it doesn't add anything, but it's weird. The crowd is into it. Whatever. So they've transitioned to LSB 801, how great thou art, and almost everyone is singing along. Unlike the Christian pop songs, I mean, it is interesting. Like it did seem like more people were involved when the songs were hymns, um, recognizable text, but then they'd get back to the repetitive kind of pop songs, and it was just like, okay, people would shine their cell phones and bounce up and down, and that was about it. Let me see. I think this is doing an excellent job of demonstrating how beloved these hymns are, even without a pipe organ. This also shows that the National Youth Gathering uses classical Lutheran hymnody mixed with pop stuff. It's not all fluff, as I was warned it would be. So this is true. It wasn't all K-Love songs. There were Lutheran hymns mixed in there, although some of them were butchered, to put it lightly. But it was, I don't know, they did a very melodic butchering. So I think one of my concerns with these night events, the skits and the studies and the songs, none of it feels serious. And yeah, this is what I get into. Like, I find this out later as it keeps going. None of it feels serious. I said, I feel like if I was a kid here, I'd feel pandered to or patronized. Yeah, like they had like skits of like, hey, it's a gamer dude. Oh no, we got to go do the mission. Oh no, I don't have enough life. And they're like holding a controller or something. Oh man, I gotta, rescue the princess from the castle or something. It's like, cringe, bro. Please don't. I don't know. It felt like pandering. Insert picture of what's his face dressed up as a high school student with a skateboard over his back saying, hello, fellow kids, or hello, fellow youths, or something like that. Like, please don't. Just, yeah. I said, none of the people who come on stage are easy to take seriously. So in the first hours, them goofing off, it's hard to see them seriously as a theological leader. Once the loud music stops and the zany antics pause, people stopped paying attention. They're talking on their phones. They're ready to react if it's time to cheer, clap, and not paying attention. Yeah, so they would have like these skits and stuff. Like they would have like loud music, and then they would do a skit. The loud music, kids are bouncing up and down, they're waving their phones with their light on and stuff like that. And they go to a skit, and all the kids are just kind of sitting there on their phones as some dumb pseudo-theological point, from their perspective, is kind of going on off in the distance. They can ignore it. It's like a commercial break for them. This is what you set yourself up when you've got this loud like concert vibe going on, and you kind of intersperse it with these really quiet sort of low energy skits, low pace skits. Like, just the kids they weren't digging it. Maybe some of them kind of were, but I looked around and I was like, yeah. Okay, here's a quote. Turn to your neighbor and say the title of my sermon. Like, what? I don't remember what the title of the sermon was, but like, I don't know, like if the title of the sermon is like, you are valuable, like turn to your neighbor and say you are valuable. Now turn to your other neighbor and say you are valuable. It's like, I mean, this really feels like the Baptist like hype the crowd up type approach. That feels off to me. I've heard it so many times, watching like Pastor Roseborough doing the prophecy bingo and stuff like that. Like, oh boy, that just really smacks of us bringing in the cultures of other non-Christian Christian groups into our worship. I said, again, maybe it's a stylistic choice, but it feels like a Lutheran taking pages from a Baptist playbook. Well, Baptists are Christians. Some people call themselves Baptists are not Christians. But yeah, anyways. The shame is that aside from this distraction, the sermon was quite solid and effective. It was about Jesus and the promise of the future that Christians have. And if there's anything more significantly wrong with the sermon, I would have nitpicked it. So I mean to say that it was quite good. So yeah, so I forget the name of the pastor. I'll probably put it like probably on this side down here somewhere. And I believe that if I remember right, the sermon was good. And I would have whined if it wasn't. All right, so they went back to the music. LSB 507, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. I said I'm listing the hymns so you can measure how much hymnody makes it into the event. Then I said my final gripe was about the blessing at the end. So this was something that was kind of weird to me. Like at the end of the night, you would expect, okay, now everybody receive the blessing, and then you do something like the Aaronic benediction or something. Like there's a bunch of blessings in the Bible that you can use. You can even make up a blessing. Lord bless you and keep you and keep you safe and have a good night. something like that. Like that's a blessing, right? He said, okay, here's the blessing, but this is what he said to do. He said, everybody put your hands on your hearts and affirm to yourself that this heart was made by God and belongs to God, and that this is true or something. So like, and that everybody else has a heart and these all belong to God. Like, okay, that's true. Yeah. Again, maybe kind of the emotional, whatever, but that's not a blessing. That's not, okay, Lord, like you're a pastor, bless the people. Just do it, please. You've been given this authority and this role. Do that. Bless the people. A billion different ways you could do it. But the whole put your hand on your heart and affirm yourself, like, okay, like, I don't know. Joel Osteen called. He wants his tactics back. Maybe that's a little too mean. I'm not saying the pastor was Joel Osteen. I'm just saying that that's something Joel Osteen would do on maybe one of his better days when he's not preaching direct heresy.